I'm Cathal Summers.
And I'm Deirdre,
your Teagasc Sustainability Advisors. And you're welcome to the Teagasc Environment Edge podcast number 30, bringing you the latest information, science and opinion to prove farm sustainability.
With a third of Ireland's greenhouse gas emissions coming from agriculture and methane being one of the biggest challenges, what is the Teagasc-led project Sea Solutions doing to solve the problem?
Dr. Maria Hayes, Teagasc Senior Researcher in Ashtown's Food Research Centre and co-ordinator of the Sea Solutions project, joins us for an update on the research.
Maria, can you tell us a little about yourself and your background as a researcher with Teagasc?
So I'm a researcher based in Teagasc Ashtown. My background is industrial micro and chemistry. I did a science degree in UCD where I did industrial micro and chemistry in third and fourth year. And then from there, I went to UCC and I did a PhD in protein chemistry down there and micro as well. So my PhD really looked at using waste proteins from the dairy industry and converted them into bioactives with health benefits for humans. So after that, then I went to Donegal where I kind of got hooked on the whole marine and I worked on marine byproducts there as well and generating products from those as part of an Enterprise Ireland funded project up there. And then I was lucky enough to get the job in Teagasc Ashtown as part of the Nutrimara project, which was all about seaweeds and formulating uses for seaweeds and marine products that can be applied to improve human health. So really about generating functional foods or foods with added health benefits for human nutrition. So yeah, I've been working really on the seaweed side of things for the last, I'd say 10 years on the human side. And more recently, we're looking at like feed ingredients and feed derived bioactives for use in animal health and nutrition.
We've discussed greenhouse gas emissions and global warming on the podcast previously, and we know it's a massive problem globally. And you're looking to tackle that problem in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. What are you doing in Sea Solutions, or can you tell me a bit about it?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to, Carl. So Sea Solutions is all about using our natural resources here in Ireland. We're an island after all. We have a wealth of seaweeds, especially found off the west coast of Ireland, but they're also in the east and the Irish Sea as well. And we're looking really at using this natural resource to convert it into feed ingredients that have potential to impact on methane emissions from cows, cattle and sheep. So within the project, it's a European-wide project. We have 9 partners from Canada and Europe, and Teagasc are leading it. And our role in it is really about developing feed ingredients with bioactivities or health benefits that can impact on methane emissions from cattle, sheep and dairy cows, as I already said. But we're really looking at quantifying actives like polyphenols and peptides, lectins, natural products that are found in seaweeds that have an inhibitory effect on methane-producing bacteria that are found in the rumen. And then because of that, they can also have an impact on emissions. So that's what the whole project is really about. So we take the seaweeds and we stabilize them. And I should mention that they're feed grade as well. Any of the seaweeds we're working with are feed grade. So they're approved as feed additives already. But we then kind of manipulate those seaweeds or feed ingredients using know-how. So we want to make them more palatable for the animals in question, for example. And we also want to make the ingredient that's reducing methane or inhibiting these methanogenic bacteria or archaea in the rumen more bioavailable. So we manipulate the seaweeds, I suppose, into feed ingredients, and then we quantify the level of the bioactives that have a positive effect on methane. And by positive, I mean they reduce methane emissions in the lab. And we do this using antibacterial assays, using methane-producing bacteria. So we just look for zones of inhibition against these in the lab. But we then also introduce the seaweeds into an artificial rumen where there are methane-producing bacteria. And we assess then the effect of those seaweeds on gas emissions. Okay, so we measure the amount of total gas or methane that's produced from this artificial rumen. And once we get a positive hit, if you like, or a positive result from both those assays, we then proceed to the animal trials. So partners in Teagasc Athenry have already carried out a sheep feeding trial with one of the seaweeds and seaweed derived extracts that we've looked at in Ashtown. And other partners are currently carrying out beef feeding trials and dairy feeding trials. They're ongoing at the moment, and all feeding trials really will be completed by the end of 2022. So we hope to have some really good news for farmers, but also good news in terms of the environment. Of course, that's our primary aim, is to reduce methane emissions, but also it's a huge benefit to the seaweed harvesting sector and the marine sector, that are kind of small SMEs currently based on the West Coast, but there's huge potential to develop those. And I suppose green the marine, if you like, introduce marine ingredients more into agriculture to benefit the environment, but also to create sustainable jobs in rural areas.
So the trials are ongoing on both indoor systems and outdoor systems, so grassland systems. How do you conduct the experiments? And could you just tell us a little bit, how do the results compare between the indoor and the outdoor systems?
Yeah, so I suppose I can't really answer that question, Deirdre, for you at the moment, because the outdoor trials aren't completed to date, but the indoor trials, so I can give an example where we used a seaweed and a seaweed extract that we identified as having potential in the Rossitech, and that was carried through to a sheep feeding trial then in Athenry. And it was administered in a feed product at concentrations ranging from 0.5 to 4% of the total feed. And then methane was measured using chambers. And we also use these things known as green feed chambers as well. So basically the emissions of methane from the animal in question, in this case the sheep, are measured, okay? And we actually did find that after a feeding period of 8 weeks, there was a reduction in methane. It wasn't as good as what we observed in the in vitro Rossitech system, which is the artificial system. There we saw reductions up on 36%, but in the live animal we saw reductions of about 12%. So it's much lower, say, than some of the reported benefits in relation to methane that have been reported by groups in Australia and New Zealand, where they use the red seaweed Asparagopsis taxiformis to reduce methane. But the actives in this case they don't have any health, they're not detrimental to health. Bromoform is the active in that red seaweed in question, and it's thought to be a carcinogen. Whereas our seaweed, the active is not bromoform, it's like polyphenolic in nature, okay? And that also has health benefits for the animal, because the polyphenolic in question is also known to have antihelminthic activity, so it can reduce worms and things like that in cattle and sheep. So also, like, 12% is comparable to a 12% reduction in methane is really comparable to some direct feed microbials that are out there already, so it is a good result, and we hope to replicate that in cattle. And that, as I said, that cattle feeding trial will finish this year.
So there's a sort of the anthelminthic end of things is kind of a benefit to animal health.
Exactly.
Could there be a knock-on then benefit with animal performance, weight gains?
Yeah, exactly. So interestingly, Emily Roscombe and Sinead Waters carried out the sheep feeding trial over in Athenry, and they did observe that the sheep did really gain a lot of weight, and they were much heavier. Yeah, so, it has a production benefit, but an environmental benefit. And then also, if you take into consideration the fact that, like, it's an anti-wormer, and normally farmers would use antibiotics, or not antibiotics, I suppose, for worms, but doses, and things like that are kind of, the EU are encouraging farmers to move away from the use of those, really, and legislation will for finish determine whether they can or not use them going forward. But they're alternative to these chemical drugs, if you like. And they're more natural, I suppose, as well. So that said, if they're included at the wrong concentration in the diet, they can have an anti-nutritional effect. But that's part of the science part of it. So if they're included at concentrations up to up to 4%, they're fine, and they do have beneficial effects for the animal.
I thought I saw that somewhere, but maybe it was Sinead Waters said it actually, that to produce that amount of methane coming out of an animal takes a lot of energy. And I suppose if you can reduce the amount of production of methane coming out, that energy can go to back into the animal, I suppose.
Yeah, so it's like optimizing really the nutrition of the animal, and they're not wasting energy, so it's going more to muscle production or meat production in the case of sheep. The results from the project so far have indicated that there is a real benefit in terms of weight gain in the sheep.
We love, I suppose, as farmers and advisors, silver bullets, how to solve problems quickly. And like we're banking on work like yours that will come up with a solution where we can give an animal a tablet or a bolus or feed it something. How do you envisage the additives to be fed to animals in the real world, I suppose?
Yeah, so I'm from a farm myself, so I know well, that all these issues and the problem of administering drugs and things to animals and ensuring that they get the correct amount of feed per day of this active ingredient to ensure that there is a real effect, So in a pasture-based system, it is a challenge, It's not as much a challenge, I suppose, if it's for dairy farmers and herds, because I suppose the dairy cow is coming into the milking parlour at least once a day to be milked. So you could give it to them in their feed ration while they're being milked. But for beef cattle and sheep, it's a different story. So we would think really that a bolus is the way to go, and that it would be administered to the animal at a young age and hopefully would have a beneficial effect. But we have to do more research into that, to be honest. But yeah, a bolus seems like the most obvious method to give the active at the moment.
I might just go back to the seaweed varieties, and we have loads of different seaweed varieties, I suppose, on our coasts. What's the screening process, Maria, that you do to establish what are the best in mitigation?
There's, I suppose, two challenges really regarding the seaweed, okay? And the first is cost, because seaweeds are currently in Ireland, they're harvested. We don't have a huge aquaculture industry currently, it's more natural harvest by seaweed producers on the west coast and south coast, So the cost really, and seaweeds are quite popular in terms of human food currently, and for use in functional foods and different things like that as well for human purposes. So they can be costly. So we have to take cost into account when we're selecting the seaweeds and to ensure that we have enough supply of the seaweed as well. So for example, that is one reason why we selected not to go with the really popular Aspergopsis taxiformis, which has shown huge methane reduction potential in studies carried out in Australia, New Zealand and Canada. And the reason for that is because that seaweed is a non-native seaweed to Irish waters and it's not available in large quantities. And when we went to source that seaweed, we had to go as far as the Azores to get it, and it was hugely expensive. So we really decided that it wasn't suitable, for our trials in animals, but even practically for farmers, currently it's not really an option unless aquaculture of that species is greatly enhanced, which at the moment it's not there. And in my opinion, it's unlikely to be there for the next 2 years. So we focused on Irish seaweeds that are found around the Irish coast in abundance, that we can source from the seaweed harvesters that produce them as feed ingredients currently, and that are, comparable to soy in terms of price, because we took that as kind of our standard feed ingredient that's already used in animal feeds, okay? So we basically focused a lot on seaweeds that are found around the Irish coast that are there in abundance. And then in terms of the actives, we focused on things like polyphenols and tannins. We quantify iodine and we quantify bromoform in all the seaweeds because they're known to have an impact on different things, but the legislation regarding their use is strict as well, and you can't have a certain level, you can't go over a certain level of iodine, for example, or it's not recommended that animals are fed things containing a lot of iodine on a daily basis. So basically we focused on things that had other actives like bromoform, peptides, lectins, where they have a proven and shown benefit to the animal. And, there isn't a strict legislation around their administration because they're very beneficial for the animal and for human health, So that was our criteria really was that initially economic, the price of seaweed, and was it practical to generate ingredients from it? And secondly, then the activity of bioactives other than bromoform and iodine is really what we focused on.
My son was asking me at the weekend, because I said I was going to be speaking to you. He was asking, could we harvest enough seaweed, or would there be enough available?
So yeah, Deirdre, that's a great question, and something I suppose, we're talking about the environment, and sustainability is key to the environment, and if this was to be developed as an ingredient, we wouldn't want to deplete any natural resource from the marine environment that would have a negative knock-on effect, but also practically for farmers or for feed producers, they have to be able to get enough of the raw material regularly to produce a product. So yeah, with the seaweeds that we've had some success with to date, we're confident that they can be harvested in sustainable quantities. They're largely available around the Irish coast. And, we're blessed. Yeah, it's great because we're blessed in Ireland that we have, I think, over 600 seaweed species in total on the west coast. And we have about 6% of global algae species here in Ireland, which is a lot for a small country like ours. But then again, if you were to redraw the map of Ireland and include our marine, it would be a lot bigger than as it's shown today on the map. So yeah, it's really a positive that the seaweeds that we've looked at so far are showing good results. They're not like a silver bullet, as Cathal said. And I personally don't believe in silver bullets, but they are reducing methane in amounts that are, comparable to direct feed microbials that are out there already being commercialized by companies, and they have added health benefit for the animal and, the weight gain aspect in terms of production as well.
The farmer said to me one day, it's not the silver bullet. You normally carry about maybe 6 or 10 in the chamber, so it's all in together. But that's the one thing that farmers would often ask me about seaweed in particular. I suppose we've been talking about for the last year or so. But yeah, does it grow back? Is there potential for us to make money off growing it and harvest it, maybe in pools or constructed pools or something? And obviously, I know, we had a farmer on the podcast a few weeks ago, and he was very aware that he didn't want to import the likes of soya because it increases carbon footprint because it's traveling half across the world. So our farmers now are looking at homegrown stuff to reduce their carbon footprint. So
exactly, and that's another good point. We have other projects apart from Sea Solutions where we're looking at using seaweeds because they have a high protein content. So some, like you mentioned, soy there, and soy is obviously used as an animal feed ingredient because of the high protein content. It's highly bioavailable and digestible, and it's that's why it's used in animal feed. But seaweeds also can contain up to 47% protein on a dry weight basis. And that's a lot. Some of the red seaweeds and the green seaweeds, and that's largely untapped currently in Ireland. So we have projects looking at that as well, and we're hoping to develop that further within U-Protein, a project that's led by Mark Fenlon here in Teagasc. We're focused on protein production from seaweeds as well for different applications. But yeah, the seaweed can be grown, I suppose, to answer your question, Cathal, it can be grown in volumes for certain species, but they're over 20,000 algal species, you know what I mean? So some of the species, the science around cultivating them and growing them in aquaculture, for example, is well advanced, whereas others, maybe it's not quite there. But for the seaweeds that we've focused on now in Sea Solutions for methane reduction, they are harvestable sustainably, and they can be harvested sustainably. There is, a science around that, and farming it really is important. You have to leave time, like any crop, for it to come back in certain areas. So you have to be careful where you harvest, and the manner in which you harvest it is very important as well. Because in Canada previously, some species of seaweeds actually they depleted their resource completely in the 80s because they didn't harvest sustainably. The science around all of that has well advanced, and here in Ireland, the producers of the feed ingredients are really harvesting sustainably. But the future is in aquaculture of the species, and growing them at sea. the concept of integrated multi-trophic aquaculture is huge, and it's growing here in Ireland even, Boardis Gavara and Udras na Gaeltachta have been looking at some work regarding growing seaweeds in conjunction with salmon farms, for example, where the waste from salmon farms is cleaned up by the seaweeds, and then the nutrients that are produced from those byproducts, I suppose, of salmon production can help seaweeds to grow, in a farm setting. So yeah, there's huge potential there, but I think some of the potential is already being tapped by Irish SMEs on the West Coast, that are really, already producing feed ingredients for industries, maybe other than dairy, cows, cattle and sheep. Like they're producing maybe for the pig industry, where the antibiotic or, the alternative antibiotic aspect of seaweeds is more established, and the gut health benefits of seaweeds, for example, for pigs are widely muted as well.
Well, Maria, look, it was great to have you on the show today and really enjoyed the chat. And I'm kind of half considering investing in some seaweed stocks now before the market goes wild, and hopefully you'll have some great results at the end of your project. And we must have you on again to have another chat. Okay, yeah, I'd be happy to. When we get more results, Cathal, I'd be delighted to come back. Thanks very much. Thanks, Maria.
That's it for this episode of the Teagasc Environment Edge podcast. Thanks to Dr. Maria Hayes, Teagasc Senior Researcher in Ashtown's Food Research Centre and Coordinator of the Sea Solutions Project, for joining us on the show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Cathal Summers. And I'm Deirdre Glenn. Join us next time for the Teagasc Environment Edge podcast, Signpost to Farm Sustainability.